And based on publicly available information, it appears, write these plaintiffs, that there were at least 2 flights that took off during the hearing. They're like, go, go, go. It's like a scene out of Con Air or something.
The president signed a proclamation invoking the Alien Enemies Act against Tren de Aragua members who have invaded our country. These are the most violent, heinous criminal monsters.
If they were not affiliated, why they were on that plane, because they came in illegally. She went through it. She gave everybody a breakdown.
Federal judges now getting told by Trump and foreign leaders. You see, this was Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, posted this over on X. This came after the New York Post reported that a federal judge orders deportation flights carrying alleged Venezuelan gangbangers to return to the U.S. These people are on an airplane flying down to El Salvador, Venezuelan gangbangers who are going to another country's prison because Bukele will house them there at a low price, flying them out. Trump invokes the Alien Enemies Act, but what happened is the judge says, turn around, bring them back. Too late. Whop, sorry. Nayib, he says, oopsie, too late. They're already here. We already put them in their cells. We're not getting them out. So come and get them, federal judge, out of Washington, D.C. But here's what Nayib posted. He says, look, today, the first 238 members of the Venezuelan criminal organization called Tren de Aragua arrived in our country. This is who we shipped out of the country, and this is who the judge wants to bring back in. 238 of Tren de Aragua arrived in our country. They were immediately transferred to the CCOT, the Terrorism Confinement Center, for a period of 1 year. Now, the United States will pay a low fee for them, but a high one for us, right? Cheap for us to send them out, and a good fee for them to receive. Well, we're going to pay a lot for these dudes. Now, over time, these actions, writes the president of El Salvador, combined with the production already being generated by more than 40,000 inmates engaged in various workshops and labor under the Zero Idleness program, will help make our prison system self-sustainable. Now, as of today, it costs $200 million per year. But on this occasion, the U.S. has also sent us 23 MS-13 members, you've heard of them, wanted by Salvadorian justice. Okay, they want these dudes too, including 2 ringleaders. Now, one of them is a member of the criminal organization's highest structure. Judge loves these people. Bring them back. I want to hang with them. Bukele says, this will help us finalize intelligence gathering and go after the last remnants of MS-13, including its former and new members, money, weapons, drugs, hideouts, collaborators, and sponsors. As always, we continue advancing in the fight against organized crime, but this time we are also helping our allies, making our prison system self-sustainable and obtaining vital intelligence to make our country an even safer place, all in a single action. May God bless El Salvador. May God bless the United States. What a nice president. What a nice statement. Thanks for helping out. And thanks for taking these people out of our country and dealing with them accordingly. So they're pulling them out, and it's just a little, montage of exactly what's happening in El Salvador. And so you get the picture. They're getting arrested and they're getting thrown out of our country. Good news and goodbye. So that happens. Of course, liberal lawyers who are filing lawsuits for the ACLU and suing in New York and suing in Washington, D.C. and every other part of the country to try to stop Trump are very unhappy about this. They love terrorists. They want them in our country. Now, Rubio, he said, hey, thank you for your assistance and your friendship, President Bukele. We appreciate it. We appreciate Marco extending that on our behalf. Now, per Bill Malugin, he reports at the border over from Fox News. He says, here's what we got going out here. Per a senior Trump administration official, there were 261 illegal aliens deported to El Salvador yesterday. 137 came out via the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. 101 were Venezuelans removed via Title VIII, regular immigration proceedings. 21 were Salvadoran MS-13 gang members. 2 were, quote, special cases for El Salvador. Bukele posted the U.S. returned 2 ringleaders, so that was a nice collaboration. And some of the rap sheets for those include the following: kidnapping, abuse of a child, robbery, aggravated assault on a police officer. This judge is like, bring them back. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt responded to this. Now, what was flying around over the weekend was this statement that you guys were violating the law and so on. And Caroline Leavitt says, we didn't violate any law, okay? We didn't violate a temporary restraining order from a judge. We were in total compliance with everything that we did. Axios was reporting this. Okay, this was flying all over the place. Exclusive! White House says it ignored a court order. And we've been harping on this for months now, saying they're waiting for the impeachment trap is what we're calling it, because they just are waiting for Trump to violate a court order. So as soon as they can say ignored or disregarded supported or overruled or whatever, they'll do that, right? Some of these words are very exciting words, but Caroline is saying we didn't ignore anything. They said he was ordered to turn around 2 plane loads of alleged Venezuelan gang members that Axios loves too, because the flights were over international waters and therefore the ruling didn't apply. Caroline came out and said, what? Watch it. The administration did not refuse to comply with the court order. Okay, your words. The order, which had no lawful basis from some hack judge in DC, was issued after terrorists, Tren de Aragua aliens, had already been removed from U.S. territory. So his order came too late. We didn't ignore it. It was late. We already left. Okay, once the train leaves the station, it's not stopping. So go pee-pee now. The written order and the administration's actions do not conflict. So we didn't ignore anything. Moreover, as the Supreme Court has repeatedly made clear, federal courts generally have no jurisdiction over the president's conduct foreign affairs, his authorities under the Alien Enemies Act, and his core Article 2 powers to remove foreign alien terrorists from the U.S. soil and to repel a declared invasion. A single judge in a single city cannot direct the movements of an aircraft carrying foreign alien terrorists who were physically expelled from U.S. soil. We are acting at our apex. He can't come in here and tell us what to do, so get out. Now, this is what Trump ultimately dropped down. He posted this over at the White House website, says, this is the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act regarding the invasion of the United States by Tren de Aragua. Said, all right, look, TDA is already designated a foreign terrorist organization. They've got thousands of members, many unlawfully infiltrated the United States, and they're conducting irregular warfare in our country. They operate in conjunction with multiple cartels, including the Maduro regime-sponsored narco-terrorism enterprise in Venezuela, kidnapping, extortion, trafficking, and more. Now, they engage in illegal mass migration into the United States, and the purpose of which is to harm the United States, undermine public safety, and destabilize America for the benefit of the Maduro regime. Now, Tren de Aragua is closely aligned with, and indeed has infiltrated, the Maduro regime, including its military and its law enforcement. That gang grew significantly while this person served as governor back then, and then he was appointed as the vice president, and more. Now, this person is currently a fugitive of the United States, facing violations for sanctions. And like others who claim to be in charge, they're not. The gang's in charge, and they're trying to flood the United States with their criminality. Now, over the years, the Venezuelan national and local authorities have ceded ever greater control to Tren de Aragua. The result is a hybrid criminal state that is perpetuating an invasion of America. Even Interpol says the same. Evidence irrefutably demonstrates that Tren has invaded the United States and continues to invade, attempting to invade, doing drug trafficking and more. And so based on all of this, everything we just detailed, in consultation with the Attorney General, the Secretary of the Treasury, and more, Marco Rubio designated Tren de Aragua as a foreign terrorist organization. And now, as President of the United States and the Commander-in-Chief, Trump says it's my solemn duty to protect the country from the devastating effects of this invasion. And so therefore, I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, by the authority vested in me by the Constitution, hereby proclaim as follows. I find and declare that TDA is perpetrating, attempting, and threatening an invasion that is predatory on the United States. A lot of it being done by Maduro in Venezuela. I make these findings based on the Constitution and the law. And so therefore, according to U.S. Code, Trump says, I proclaim that all Venezuelan citizens 14 years of age or older who are members of TDA, who are within the United States, are not actually naturalized or lawful permanent residents of the U.S. and are liable to be apprehended and removed as alien enemies. And I find and declare that they are engaged in actual hostility against the United States and that they're a danger to our country. Now, I direct the Attorney General within 60 days to publish a letter under her signature with this proclamation and transmit this to the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court and the Chief Judge of every Circuit Court of Appeals, and let every single person know these are terrorists. I direct that all alien enemies described in this proclamation are subject to immediate apprehension and removal. And the Attorney General and Homeland, Pam and Christie, they will secure and remove every alien enemy described in this proclamation, and do it fast. All executive departments are now on notice, and pursuant to my authority, I hereby direct the Attorney General and others to detain and remove and take all necessary actions consistent with this to get it done. Pursuant to the authority here, I also declare it's necessary for public safety. No alien enemy shall attempt to enter the United States. All alien enemies who are apprehended shall be prosecuted and subject to the removal, and their property shall be seized and forfeited if they bring it in. The Attorney General is also further granted to effectuate prompt apprehension and just get it done. Signed under his hand of our Lord and Savior, signed by President Trump in the White House. So, amazing invocation. So, Trump's DOJ submitted this notice to the court from the Deputy Assistant Attorney General called Drew. Says, all right, Judge, and this is the same judge who's already ordered and prevented Trump from sending out terrorists terrorists. Even El Salvador says, yeah, they're terrorists. We want them. We'd definitely like to have them, so thanks for sending them. The judge said, no, bring now. You can't do it. Bring them back. So they said, listen, all right, for the reasons explained on the record at one of those prior Zoom hearings, federal defendants, Trump, because they're being sued, object to this court's assertion over jurisdiction, saying you don't even have power over what you're claiming, including over the president's exercise of powers vested in him by Article 2. Okay, the Constitution, judge, has more power than you, and that's what we're following. So subject to that objection, federal defendants were promptly notified of the court's temporary restraining order issued in the morning and the 7:26 p.m. minute order that temporarily enjoined any removals pursuant to the presidential proclamation. Now, just to be clear, while all this is happening, Trump is loading these dudes onto airplanes. Like those luggage handlers, okay, they don't care about throwing luggage when it comes to deporting these people. They just throw them, right? Throw it, bounce around, who cares? Load them up. So Trump is flying them out like as this judge is issuing orders, and the plaintiffs, the people who love terrorists, are suing to keep them in. It's like total bedlam. So like 12 hours is just total chaos, right? Because Trump's throwing these people on airplanes. Like, go! The pilot's like, go, go! Federal defendants, Trump, have now sought emergency appellate relief from the D.C. Circuit as to both of your orders, saying we are deporting them. And the Court of Appeals has now ordered expedited briefing on both motions. So even the Court of Appeals is paying attention. The 5 individual plaintiffs who were the subject of the first TRO, okay, the first one that we mentioned, have not been removed. So if you're a party to this lawsuit, the judge's first TRO applied to them, and they didn't remove those people. They're still here for now. But going forward, and in the absence of appellate relief, so with the Court of Appeals, Trump and the State Department and others will continue to protect the United States using authorities other than the proclamation. Independent source theory. Federal defendants further report, based on information from Homeland, that some gang members subject to removal under the proclamation had already been removed from the United States under the proclamation before the issuance of this court's second order. All right, so now you're just playing around with rules. Judge issues first order that only applied to the 5. Meanwhile, Trump is just like dumping these people out of airplanes, right, with parachutes. This is close enough. Yeah, you're good. You'll make it. Dropping them out. Then they issue a second order. And by the way, that first batch of people they're throwing out of the airplanes, that was pursuant to the proclamation, which had not been stopped yet. They were not enjoined from using that power to get rid of those people. Then the judge comes out, issues a second TRO, now says it applies to the entire planet, because this judge is the president now, and he's in charge. So then they're still throwing people out of the airplanes, but now they're just relying on different authority. They're just not relying on the proclamation anymore. Like, oh, okay, fine. Article 2, we'll just use that. Oh, we'll just use this act and this act and this act and all these other powers that give the president the power to do it. So judge, we haven't actually violated anything, okay? You gave us an explanation, says, as long as we don't use the proclamation, we're good, so we didn't. It's really the same pattern that is mirroring the USAID case and all of the other cases that we've been covering here. And Trump, I think, is waving this big shiny object around with these orders and memos. They're all suing under it, and he's just canceling it anyways, just like he canceled the USAID contracts. So they respond. Now they're furious. They're like, wait a minute, Trump is deporting these people right now. They say, Your Honor, this is from them, Trump just sent a notice to you, as we just read. He's like, we deported them. They're gone. They're gone. So they're not coming back. Explaining why they believe that their actions implementing the proclamation were consistent with your orders. However, in addition to numerous media reports and publicly available data suggesting that Trump violated your order, the government's own notice raises questions. And so we need you, Your Honor, to step in on this. And they did. The judge ultimately stepped in and set a hearing for today, which we're coming to. First, they say the government's letter states the order was issued at 7:26 p.m. Okay, because they're still dropping people out of airplanes until the order drops. Like, is there an order yet? No, there's not. Okay, you're gone. How now? Is there an order? No. Okay, gone. Next. There's an order? All right, you're lucky, bro. Like, you're about to throw your booty out, but you're here. So first, the government says 7:26, but that's the time that the written order went on PACER. During the hearing at 6:45 and 6:48, this court orally and unambiguously directed the government to turn around any airplanes carrying individuals who were being removed pursuant to the proclamation. Okay, this is what the judge said at the hearing. Like, they're on the airplane, okay? The airplane is flying out. The judge says, okay, that you shall inform your clients of this immediately. Clients meaning the government. DOJ is representing the government. In this case, it's State Department or whatever. And that any plane containing these folks that is going to take off or is in the air, the judge says, needs to be returned to the United States. But those people need to be returned to the United States. However that's accomplished, whether turning around a plane or not embarking anyone on the plane, or those people covered by this on the plane, I leave that to you. But this is something you need to make sure is complied with immediately. Okay, so in other words, the judge said that at like 6:45 and 6:48, then issued the order at 7:26. So in that 40 minutes or so, you get as many people just deported as possible. It matters, obviously, because they're so upset about that time that elapsed. Now, the oral order, of course, carries no less weight than the written order, and so they should have stopped deporting people at 6:45 or so. Now, second, these terrorist lovers remain extremely concerned that regardless of which time is used, the government may have violated the court's order. Trump stated that some gang members subject to removal under the proclamation had already been removed from the United States territory under the proclamation before the issuance of the second order. They say, Your Honor, that strongly suggests the government has chosen to treat this court's order as applying only to individuals still on U.S. soil or already on flights that have not cleared U.S. airspace as of 7/26. If that's how they proceeded, it was a blatant violation of this order. All right, so they're like, in other words, they're in the air, they're overseas, they're in international water, they're already gone. All right, and we're interpreting this as if only applies to certain land. People who are not on that land don't count. Now, whether or not the planes had cleared U.S. territory, the U.S. retained custody, at least until the planes landed and were turned over to foreign governments. So like, no, sorry, it's in the air, judge, it's over international waters. Like, well, you're still flying the plane. It's still an American pilot. And the court could not have been clearer that it was concerned with losing jurisdiction and authority to order those individuals returned if they're handed over to foreign governments. What's he going to do? Order a foreign court to do something? No. Not with whether the planes had cleared territory. The judge said this, okay, but then I would assume that means that they, the 5 named plaintiffs, okay, the people who are actually a party to this, are either not on the planes or that they will not be removed from the planes and they'll be brought back once the planes land in El Salvador. Is that fair? The court again said, again, just so we're clear, if the planes have already landed and discharged their occupants, aside from the 5 I enjoined earlier, then this order, I don't have jurisdiction to require their return, right? Like if it's an El Salvadorian judge, what's he going to do? And based on publicly available information, it appears, right, these plaintiffs, that there were at least 2 flights that took off during the hearing. They're like, go, go, go. It's like a scene out of Con Air or something. But landed even after this court's written order. Meaning that the defendants could have turned the plane around without handing over individuals subject to the proclamation and the court's TRO. And although that information was obviously in their possession, the terror lovers nonetheless emailed the lawyers for the government about these flights. So they had somebody looking up, right? These firms are good. They had somebody looking up this flight. It's Global X flight, departed Texas at 5:26, landed in Honduras at 7:36. Like, oh man, how many of our terror friends are on there that we want back in America? This one too, 5:45 left, landed El Salvador 8:02. So they're like, well, it was still in the air. If the judge issued the opinion at 7:25 or whatever the time was, 7:26, they were still in the air at 7:36. They could have just pulled up, turned around. They hadn't landed yet. Same at 8:02. Pull up, come back home, because they want these people in our country forever. Third, even if only the written order is still relevant, and even if the court had only meant to order them if they're still in U.S. territory, right? Because they're like, well, they're over El Salvador now. According to at least one media report, one of the planes departed after the written order was issued. Washington Post said they're still flying them out. Man, it would have been nice if they cared about flying them in, but they didn't. They were okay with flying them all in. Plaintiffs also informed defendants about this flight. They said, you got to cancel this one. They're like, we're going to get on it. Yeah, no, I know. We'll let them know when we get back to the office. We'll tell them. We can't text and drive. It's illegal. So beyond the concerns raised by the government's own letter, there has been significant media reportings that they defied the court's order. Axios, for example, all this, state media, they reported that the White House Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, and Homeland Secretary Kristi Noem chose not to turn the planes around. Officials claimed that they could ignore this order. The planes were already over international waters. This judge can go get them himself. The Axios article was later updated with a statement from Caroline. She says the administration did not refuse to comply, you big babies. The order, which had no lawful basis, was issued after they were already removed from U.S. territory. It's not in conflict with anything. And the president has power to remove these people, and that's exactly what they did. Someone else reported from ABC, Trump administration ignores judge's orders. No, he didn't. He complied with it tactically and got it done. Now, finally, some of the public comments made by Trump and the president of El Salvador make us very nervous, right? These people. For example, El Salvador President Nayib Bukele tweeted a New York Post headline writing, federal judge orders deportation flights carrying Venezuelan gangbangers to return to the U.S. because they love the gangbangers. We're sure they do. Blocks Trump from from invoking Alien Enemies Act. And then, of course, Bukele posted this. Oopsie, too late, already here. Come and get them if you want them. And so they posted this. Secretary Marco Rubio also retweeted that from his personal account because it's hilarious. So in sum, right, the gangbang lovers, given the careful phrasing of the government's letter and the public data and the government's own statement, they're not abiding by your order. And so you should hold a hearing and ask them, and they did, they had this hearing today, whether any flight with individuals subject to the proclamation took place after either the written or oral orders were issued. Okay, so timing. Did the plane land after either orders were issued? Like, these people are so nuts. They wanted these gangbangers to pull the plane back up and bring them back home. ACLU lawyers, let's see who wrote this. Whether any flight with individuals subject to the proclamation was still in the air after either order, and whether they were transferred to a foreign country because they want these people back. Okay, so here are all these just some of the worst of the worst. Look at all these people on this one. Wow. Noel Smith, Oscar Sarabia Roman, Arthur Spitzer, Scott Michelman, ACLU from the DC, District of Columbia, Lee Gallant, and all these people. How many people do you need? Golly. All these other people too. From Democracy Forward. 3 ACLU divisions and Democracy Forward all jumping in on this because they hate America, they love gangbangers, and they want more of them here. So then Rubio and Trump sent this in response. So they say, listen, Judge, this is ridiculous. This hearing should not take place at all. Says, first of all, these gangbang lovers cannot use these proceedings to interfere with the president's national security and foreign affairs authority, and this court lacks the jurisdiction to do that either. In response to their filings and to this court's order setting a hearing for this afternoon, the government submits the response. And because it provides all the information to show that we're in compliance with your orders, it's everything that you need, and you should vacate this hearing and stop these grave incursions on the executive branch that you have already concocted against us. Now, as the government, writes Trump, has already explained and that these gangbangers do not appear to dispute, the government complied with the TRO on the morning of the 15th and did not remove any of the 5 alleged gangbangers. The government did so despite its powerful jurisdictional and other objections to the court's unprecedented power to interfere with this presidential proclamation. We have the very power to do this, and you cannot pass judgment on that discretion. If the judge can make a decision over the president, right? If the president exercises discretion that the president is empowered to exercise, and the judge says, well, I think that was wrong. The judge is the president, just to be clear. The Constitution says Trump can do these things. If the judge comes up with some concoction, well, that's really kind of against the rule because this, whatever, and all that stuff, wrong. That's an encroachment on Article 2. It's a violation of the separation of powers. The judge is violating the Constitution. Much of the plaintiff's submissions, writes Trump, rest on the oral directives that this judge gave to them. But as they even acknowledge, the court's written injunction properly did not seek to interfere with Article 2 powers or military operations by directing the return of aliens who was associated with a designated foreign terrorist organization already removed, saying we could still do those things. Okay, this was our independent source called the Constitution. Now, contrary to their assertion, an oral directive is not enforceable as an injunction. Okay, there's law that says it. The rule says that every order granting an injunction must state the reasons why it's issued and give reasonable detail about what's restrained or required. So when the judge said it out loud, it wasn't good enough for us. We waited for the written order so we knew exactly what to do and how to do it. And by the way, the district here in Washington, D.C. has been following this for a long time. This case from 2003 says the same thing, and that principle holds true when the court does issue a written order, but even phrases it more narrowly, which is what has been done here. And so in accord with this well-established law, the written minute order governed that came down from the judge. It stopped the government from, quote, removing the foreign terrorists, quote, pursuant to the proclamation. The government didn't do that. We didn't remove anybody based on the proclamation. As they even admit, the 2 flights left before they left the United States before 7/25. So they were already out of U.S. territory. So it counts from when the wheels go up, not when the wheels go down. So read it and weed. Now, as to any flights that were already outside U.S. territory and airspace, anyone aboard had already been removed. So they were gone within the meaning of the Alien Enemies Act and the court's order. So they were not removed. They were not removed after the order. They were removed before the order. So it was valid. We didn't violate your requirements. The plain meaning of remove means the transfer of one person to one location or another. And that meaning aligns with the Alien Enemies Act, and they were removed. And you don't have jurisdiction after they're removed. And so this assertion from them about the U.S. having custody until the wheels dropped at 7/25, they're not even relevant. They don't question what occurred beyond U.S. territory because that That is national security. That's foreign relations. And it's not their jurisdiction at all. In fact, this is the president's house. Get out. Indeed, they cannot be answered in public proceedings either. And so we saw a lot of this at the hearing today. They're like, we're not talking about any of this. Just like, wait, you're not talking to me or anyone, to you and to everyone. So you're all cut off. Neither plaintiffs nor the public are entitled to that sensitive national security information, and we're not disclosing it anyways. And so finally, even if the court's order had purported to stop the government from taking steps overseas pursuant to the proclamation, that still would not restrict from the president from exercising his other authorities under the Constitution to protect the U.S. from dangerous terrorists. Here's why. The president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Article 2, Section 2. The power is exclusive to the president. It includes all authorities essential to its due exercise. As commander-in-chief, the president is authorized, this is an 1866 case, to direct movements of the naval and military forces placed by law at his command, and to employ them in the manner he may deem most effectual to harass and conquer and subdue the enemy. The president is also constitutionally empowered to engage in diplomatic negotiations and foreign relations, and these are inherent Article 2 presidential powers, especially when exercised outside the United States. And guess what? They are not subject to judicial review or to intervention from these judges. Another case from 1918 decided in the U.S. Supreme Court called Oichin versus Sent said, this court has no jurisdiction of a bill to enjoin the president in the performance of his official duties, right? If the president is doing what the president is allowed to do, the courts cannot interfere. The conduct of foreign relations of our government is committed by the Constitution to the executive and legislative, the political departments of the government, and the propriety of what is done is not subject to judicial inquiry there by the courts. In sum, writes Trump, just as a court could not enjoin the president from carrying out a foreign drone strike or an overseas military operation, or from negotiating with a foreign power on that operation, nor could a court lawfully restrict the president's inherent Article 2 authority to work with a foreign nation to transfer terrorists and criminals who are already outside the United States. And consequently, even if one could broadly and improperly construe the court's written minute order as restricting the government from turning over to foreign governments alien enemies who were already abroad, that was still limited by the term where you said pursuant to the proclamation. We weren't acting pursuant to the proclamation. We were acting pursuant to independent power. Now, once the terrorist had been removed from the United States, any decision by Trump to take such actions pursuant to independent constitutional authority is not a violation of your order, which was only limited to the proclamation. So, because there has been no violation of this court's orders, and because the government is not prepared to disclose any further national security or operational details to plaintiffs or the public, this court should vacate this hearing. The government does not make this request lightly. The executive branch has designated Tren de Aragua as a foreign terrorist organization, a designation that they don't even challenge. The course of these proceedings in which this court has enjoined and stopped the removal of aliens that we've determined are a part of a terrorist organization raises extraordinary concerns about the rule of law and the executive branch's ability to take swift actions to keep the nation safe. Signed by Drew Ensign, Deputy Assistant AG out in Washington, D.C., and the rest of the team there. Now, this is going up to the Court of Appeals, and this was filed by Drew Ensign, Deputy Assistant Attorney General, coming out today. You can see going to the clerk of the Court of Appeals. They're very unhappy with this judge as well. They say, listen, Supreme Court, dear Mr. Sislak, pursuant to the rules, the government provides urgent notice of developments below from Judge Boasberg. Yesterday, the government provided a notice regarding its compliance with the district court's TROs attached. Then overnight, the gangbang lawyers responded and they asked the district court to compel the government to address operational details about flights that removed aliens that were identified as being associated with a designated foreign terrorist organization. Okay, so it's not just like illegals who are, migrants who are just coming here to improve and get a better life, work in the fields, doing jobs Americans won't do. No, not that. It's foreign terrorists. And it's not like the, kind of pseudo-terrorists that half the country or, portions of the country say are terrorists, but, fight over like the designation when it comes to Hamas or other groups, right? But here it's a Tren de Aragua cartel. It's like unequivocally that, right? And my point with the Hamas comment is that there are many people seemingly protesting and fighting for Khalil, saying that they're not terrorists, right? And it's a legitimate organization and so on. But my point here is these are the people that the left is fighting for. It's like foreign terrorists, however you define them. It's a wild thing to even have to be like defending that, but that's what they do. The district courts are now set an open public hearing for 5 p.m. and they order the government shall be prepared to provide answers to the questions raised by plaintiffs, right? So Trump is talking talking to the Court of Appeals saying, I can't believe they're making us do this. All of the questions at issue relate to past actions. They're not prospective compliance with the court's orders. Now, that development escalates the stakes of the district court's inappropriate exercise of jurisdiction and the risks that the district court may force the government to disclose sensitive national security and operational security concerns or face significant penalties from the courts, right? You better tell us, the judge is saying, tell me that you violated my order so I can penalize you, or else. The government cannot and will not be forced to answer sensitive questions of national security and foreign relations in a rushed posture without orderly briefing and a showing that these questions are somehow material to a live issue. In other words, Court of Appeals, we are preparing to not comply. Answering them, especially on the proposed timetable, is flagrantly improper and presents grave risk to the conduct of the government in areas wholly unsuited to micromanagement supervision by a district court judge. The district court's hasty public inquiry into these sensitive national security matters, with no contemplated protections against disclosure of operational details, underscores the urgency and the immediate relief from this court, including an immediate administrative stay that would allow further briefing to unfold in an orderly and appropriate manner and prevents the district court from further efforts to interfere with Trump's constitutional powers. This court should also immediately, reassign this case to another district court judge, because this guy is highly unusual and doing improper procedures. He certified a class action involving members of a designated foreign terrorist organization in less than 18 hours with no discovery and no briefing from the government at all that have been employed in the district court proceedings to date. The guy is just nuts. The press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, was out today. Here is what she said about all of this litigation.
In just 1 month, President Trump has used his executive authority to secure our southern border. It proves that everybody who claimed we needed a border bill was wrong. We just needed a new president who actually cared about securing our homeland and enforcing our immigration laws. You mentioned daily gotaways, 77. That's an astronomical decrease from the previous administration. There's been a 99% decrease of illegal migrants crossing through the Darien Gap. If you talk to Border Patrol agents and ICE agents, they will tell you the camaraderie in these agencies is at an all-time high because they are actually being allowed to do their jobs. In breaking news this morning, Maria, the president signed a proclamation invoking the Alien Enemies Act against Tren de Aragua members who have invaded our country. These are the most violent, heinous criminal monsters you could ever imagine. They have taken the lives of innocent American women like Jocelyn Nungre and Laken Riley, and the president invoked this authority to deport nearly 300 of them who are now in El Salvador, where they will be behind bars, where they belong, rather than roaming freely in American communities. This is a massive win for the American public, and it is going to save lives.
Yeah, and it's interesting how the Democrats spent the last 4 years calling American citizens terrorists. Remember? Homegrown, domestic violent terrorists. And they were raiding J6ers' houses. They were going after parents showing up at school board meetings. They were going and fighting against pro-lifers and more. And the ACLU wasn't screaming off the rooftops about that because there was a 4-hour riot and there were some bumps and bruises and some scrapes. And most people were there lawfully and peacefully, entrapped and ensnared by their own government. ACLU wasn't anywhere to be found on that one. But you get some foreign human traffickers in our country and suddenly all these lawyers spring into action. Oh no, due process in America. All this stuff for foreigners who broke the law to get here in the first place. Sick behavior from the lefty lawyers. Now, here was another one from Caroline. She was out today and Ducey asked her a question, wondering about these people on the airplane.
If these guys are terrorists at war with the United States, is President Trump considering anything more lethal to address them than just sticking them on a plane somewhere else?
Well, it sounded like you had a little bit of curiosity in the premise of your question, so I want to address it. These are designated foreign terrorists. The president signed a proclamation on February 20th, 2025, designating TDA as a foreign terrorist organization that was in consultation with the Attorney General and the Secretary of Treasury. That was pursuant to 8 U.S. Code 1189. The president has the right to do that, and I think nobody would argue that Tren de Aragua should be designated a foreign terrorist organization. If you want to have that argument, I'm happy to do it. These are heinous monsters, rapists, murderers, kidnappers, sexual assaulters, predators who have no right to be in this country, and they must be held accountable.
All right, so Caroline Leavitt dropping knowledge saying these people are terrorists. Chuck Grassley, senator, says another day, another judge unilaterally deciding for the whole country. Isn't that fun? This time to benefit foreign gang members. If the Supreme Court or Congress doesn't fix this, we're headed towards a constitutional crisis. Senate Judiciary Committee is taking action, which is good news. We'll see see what they can do or come up with. We also have Alina Abba in the House, and she's explaining what her take is on this judge.
I am. And if you need to call it a war, let's call it a war on fentanyl crisis. Let's call it a war on sex trafficking. Let's call it a war against the individuals that have been murdered, that have been violently raped, that have been hurt so violently by these animals. And they are animals. These people, as Caroline astutely said, we can name every single gang that they're affiliated with. We know if they were not affiliated, why they were on that plane, because they came in illegally. She went through it. She gave everybody a breakdown. We know what we're doing, and we're doing it. We're doing it well. And that's why America is safer. That's why our border is safer. And that's why we're going to get fentanyl crisis along with tariffs and everything else that we're doing to get that out of our country all back together. Because this country, what happened the last 4 years, it's despicable. We have a lot of work to do, and having rogue judges try and stop America and the president from doing the job that he was elected to do is silliness and has to stop.
It does have to stop. The question is, what can be done? Maybe Congress can impeach these people because these judges have just gone absolutely nuts.